Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ari-Matti Sareen. I work as an application specialist here at CSC. And today in this webinar, we are going to look a bit about moving data between CSC and your local computer. I have a couple of slides to start with, and after that, I'm going to demonstrate some of the commands. And these slides are available in the webinar webpage. And the slides also include all the commands I'm using today, so you don't have to try to copy them from the screen. You can check the slides, it's probably easier that way. So to get started, I'm going to go through some brief generalizations. So the first thing is that directories containing lots of files. With lots, I mean like thousands or tens of thousands of files. They are often problematic. Even simple commands like ls will take a very long time and may even fail. So if you are ever in a case where it seems like you would have tens of thousands of files in a single folder, it's better to use subdirectories or aggregation. And by aggregation, I mean you use tar or zip or something to make packages of the files, or when possible use file formats that support having, for example, data from several samples in same file. And on the similar note, when saving data to the HPC archive or IDA, the data should always be packaged because those are basically tape-based storage systems, and on tape-based systems, having lots of small files is very inefficient and will make everything very, very slow. So especially in those cases, always use tar or similar tool to package the files. Second thing is that when moving, it's usually faster to move one large file than many small ones. And this is because on many transfer programs and protocols, the program has to make connection every time for a new file. So it has to make connection and do the handshakes with the receiving end. And if you have lots of small files, this can be bad for time. So I've seen cases where the sort of handshake part of transfer takes 3 seconds per file and the transfer itself 1 second, which of course is not the problem for one file, but if you have 10,000 files and do that, then efficiency goes low and it gets very, very slow. But this depends a bit on transfer protocol, the program you use, and we are going to discuss more that later on this webinar. On the other hand, you should avoid too large files. This is especially if you have to use transfer tools that do not allow you to continue a transfer that has been cut short. If your network is good and fast and you can transfer your files to CSC with no problem, then no problem, you don't have to worry about that. But if you feel that you have some very large file and it always gets cut short, you never get the whole file transferred, and for some reason you can't use these tools that allow you to continue disrupted transfer, then one thing you could think is to cut up the big file to small chunks. So it's much nicer to resend 100 gigabyte chunk than try the whole 1 terabyte file over and over again and never get it to transfer. And you should also consider compression. So it of course depends what your data is like. But text-based file formats, so typically say various tables that are comma separated or tab separated, they usually compress very well. And in bioinformatics, sequence files are also typical things that compress very well. If the file is already compressed, then no sense of compressing it again. And also you should check because some file formats are already compressed. So for example, the .bam files that are commonly used these days in bioinformatics, they are already compressed, so compressing them again will not make them any smaller. Another thing is that check your files after transfer. Quite often, if your file is broken in transfer, you will get an error message right away when you try to use it in some tool. But this is not necessarily so. Some files can break so that the programs using them don't really notice it. I myself sometimes have, I had one instance where I ran a very long homology search and only later on realized that the genome FASTA file that I had used was broken. And so after 3 days, I realized that all the results were total garbage. So it's a good idea to check your files. Some quick check is to check the file size. You can use ls with L. Here you should notice that depending on your operating system and file system, some systems may report the file size slightly differently. So if there's a small difference, that's not necessarily a bad sign. It might be just normal. But if the file is say 500 megabytes on your own computer and 200 in title work, clearly something has gone wrong and the file is broken. For the text-based file formats, you can also easily and fast count the lines using the WC command. So these are sort of quick, rough checks. But if you want to be sure, you can calculate a checksum. For example, the MD5 sum is available in pretty much every Linux distribution, and it's available in Taito. And that is a very good way to find out that your file is really the same on both ends. And calculating checksum doesn't take long at all, and it's also easy to do it for the whole contents of the folder or so on. But I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So the rest of the slide are just all the commands I'm going to use in the webinar, so I'm not going to go through them here, but I thought it would be nice to have them available. So I'm going to go through some of the methods you have available to transfer files to and from CSC computers. And I'm going to start with some of the more simple ones and then go through the more complex ones. So perhaps the most simple one is to use the scientist user interface. And here in the services we have this My Files option. So here we have, for example, here is the title, home directory, work directory, and all the subdirectories. And here you can, if you bring out the context menu, you have the option to download a file to your computer. And if you click sort of and you also have the chance to upload. So it will bring up a file browser on your own computer, and you can and now I download it, or I could download one of these files and it will again. And it depends on your browser settings where you put it. For me it goes to the downloads folder, but if you set your browser settings so that it will ask you every time, or whatever is your preference. So the nice thing about this is that this does not need any installations on your own computer. So it just needs the web browser. So if you are, on some other computer, not your own, but on some loaner or something like that, you can transfer files to and from CSC. But the bad point is that this is a little bit clumsy. So it's not that difficult to transfer many files at a time, and sometimes you have problems with big files, especially with some browsers and things like that. So this is a sort of simple way and good backup plan if you don't have the other options available. But perhaps not my first choice for. So one step up, so to speak, are various graphical file transfer tools. Here I have the free FileZilla tool. Let's minimize that. So here, for example, to transfer this file, I could just drag it to my desktop and the file gets transferred, or transfer some file from my own computer. So these are quite nice, they work well, they have lots more options than, for example, just the scientist user interface. So this is quite good option, but of course the sort of possible negative point is that these have to be installed. So if you can install programs on your own computer, then no problem. But I know that for some people, at least, all the installations have to go through the department support or whatever. So it might be a bit more difficult to get them to use. But as I said, this is the one I show now is FileZilla, and that's available for pretty much all operating systems. There are many others, and they all work quite well. This is just the one that I'm used to using. So sort of one step up for a bit more complicated thing. It's possible to actually remote mount directories over SSH connection. And here the actual installation and setup it's not difficult, but it's a bit more complicated. So if you are familiar with Linux or Mac, it's probably no problem for you. If not, you might need help from somebody else, and actually you might need root access to your computer. I'm not 100% sure about this. At least the default way of installing it requires root access. So for Linux, the necessary packages are SSHFS and Fuse. For Mac OS, there's OS X Fuse, and for Windows there's a package called Docan that does the same, but I'm actually not at all familiar with Docan. So, but you can find more information on our web pages. And so I'm not going to do the setup phase because that will differ totally from your operating system. And on Linux it's different on each distribution, but I can briefly demonstrate it. So what I'm doing here is I'm mounting my Taito workdir to this local directory called Taito_workdir. Oh, then I don't. Okay, I have not. Oh, sorry, typo. Okay, now looks better. For a moment there, I thought I had not installed it on this computer. I'm demonstrating this on a virtual machine on my local laptop. So, but now I mounted it, and now I can basically open this as it was a local directory. And this can be useful especially if you are using some program to process these files. So you could just use the program and use the file open dialog and whatever and open one of these files, and you could access them directly. So can be rather nice and useful. But one thing you have to remember here is that even if they now look like they are local files on this computer, they actually still are in my Taito work disk. So if I'm actually trying to open one of the files here, it has to be transferred with SSH. And if it's a large file, then that will can take quite a long time. And sometimes it might happen if you are opening it directly from some analysis software. It might take so long that the software actually has a timeout error and gives you some error message that the file cannot be accessed. So if the file is large, it's still better to first transfer it to your own local computer. But here I can use the normal ways. I can drag and drop files and so. So here, good thing, once it's set up, it's quite easy to use, as long as you remember that file transfer still takes time. But the bad point is that it does require some system level setup on your computer. So, but it depends what you do, what kind of files you have. This could be something that is useful for you. So to unmount the folder, I can do that, and now if I open it, it's just an empty folder here on my computer because it's no longer linked. So these were sort of the graphical options of moving. And from here on, I'm going to talk more about command line options. These may be a bit more difficult to get started with because there are often many options you have to remember and so on. But I personally feel quite often when you are working in Taito, you are working on command line anyway, and these are the commands. They are much more easy to sort of integrate to your normal work and workflow. And they also have many more options, useful options than those graphical tools. And I'm going to talk more about those when we get. So the most basic sort of command line based tool to transfer file is called SCP, and it works pretty much the same as the CP command, so copy command on Unix machines. So I could give a file name, so I want to transfer this file, and I want to transfer it, for example, to the webinar subfolder in my workdir folder. It will ask my password, and after that it will transfer the file. And similarly, I can copy files from the other direction. So I could have this remote folder first, and file name and the local folder. So it works on both directions. You can also, in the in this first example, I just gave the folder name, so the file was copied with the same name. I could also give file name here, and then it would be copied to that file name. So if I want to rename it at the same time, it's also possible to transfer many files. So I could, if I had many files, just list all the files here, and you can also use the joker sign. So in this case, I happen to have two files that had ending .gtf, so both will get transferred. There's also option R, -R, and that means recursive, so it's also possible to transfer a whole folder and its subfolders recursively. So I can actually stop that one. SCP is basically replacement for the CP command. It has pretty much the same options and works with the same logic. Only difference in that on one end you don't have a local file name, but rather you have a web address with your username and the server name. So the one step up, so to speak, from SCP is rsync command, and rsync has lots and lots of options, and reading the usually the sort of go-to advice is that look at the man page of the software, but I must say that with rsync the man pages can be quite disheartening, let's say. It's very long and not quite clear, but you can do a lot of useful things with just a handful of the basic options. And also, if you Google, you can find very good web pages with example commands and tutorials. So, and rsync is something that I really recommend you get at least look at, because if you remember the very first slide I showed, and rsync takes care of most of those considerations. So, for example, if you do have many files, rsync is quite okay with transferring those, because it will just do the handshake once and then just trim all the files through. So it works even with many files. You don't necessarily have to prepackage them with tar or anything like that. Also, rsync has the option to continue a file transfer if it gets broken midway. And you can also tell it to compress the files automatically. So with one command, you can basically take care of most of the considerations on my first slide, so it can be really useful. Not the first one about the directories, because that is the limitation of operating systems and file systems. But just to give a simple example. So here I give it some options. So first of all, I use, say, A. That means archival mode. So it will copy all the files and all the directories recursively, and it will also preserve all the timestamps and user rights on the files. I can also tell it V for verbose, so I can see what it's doing. That's always nice. And I can add chet for compress. So now it will compress all the files, and it's quite smart about that, so that if it recognizes that the file is already compressed, it won't redo it. Async can use various transfer protocols. In this case, I tell it to use SSH, Secure Transfer Protocol, and I will transfer a folder called test here on my on this local computer. And to that webinar subfolder in my and so now it transferred them. I have it here. So here we can see that I got all the files transferred, and I could also here demonstrate the use of the checksum, and also some so if you look at that, so you can see that I calculated the checksum MD5 checksum for all the files and redirected the output to this file check.md5. And here for each file we have a checksum and then the file name. And now if I rerun the async command, you will see that it didn't retransfer those example starting files, because it saw that they are already in the target directory, so it only transferred the new file that did not exist. So in this mode, async can be used to synchronize two folders. So if you have one folder on your home computer and one on in Taito workdir, you can sort of keep them synchronized. And actually here in Taito we can run mdsum again with that checksum file, and it will report us that all the files are okay. There is one thing, so you have to be a bit careful with async, is that by default it will not check the timestamps between the ends. So here we could I now updated the timestamp here on this file checkmd, so it's actually now newer than here. Well, actually I have to do it. Let's do it the other way now. So I'll first update the timestamp here, so otherwise it will not get retransferred because it was already transferred. And then I will do it again here. So now here async thinks that this file has changed, but actually here in Taito the file is newer. But if I now do it with these same settings, it will actually overwrite the one in Taito. So even if now the one on my local computer is older, so you have to be a bit careful with this so that you don't by accident overwrite your, if you edit the file and you might accidentally edit it with the older one. So to make sure that doesn't happen, you can actually add U up option here, and that means update. So now actually saw that the file on Taito was newer and need not transfer it. So adding the U, you can make sure that you don't overwrite if the another good option is if I remove the file here and run actually nothing gets done, and you can see that here on Taito the check here still exists. So if you really want to make sure that the different folders are on your local computer and Taito work are the same, you can add delete option. And now you can see it actually deletes the file from here in Taito workdir because it no longer exists on my local computer. Especially when you can I update the timestamp so that something gets done. So especially when you start adding these delete options and update options, you might want to first check what will happen so that you got the command right. And for it, there's this N option. It means dry run. So it will show you what would happen. So it would transfer all these, and if there was something to delete, it would show here. But actually nothing got done. It just showed you what would happen if you didn't have the N option. So it's a good way to check before if you are unsure and you don't want to make any mistakes and delete files by mistake or something like that. Or right. So other way why async is good is for transferring big files. And now I use this capital P option, and that's the same as defining options dash dash partial, which will tell it to keep partially transferred files, and dash dash progress, that will show progress during transfer. So it will start transferring it. And let's assume that somewhere in the middle your connection gets broken. I will now simulate that by canceling the job, but so the transfer got stopped midway. We have the file here, but it's clearly not as big as in the other way. But if I now rerun the same command, you can see that it jumped immediately to the 30% mark where it got cut off. So this is a good way to transfer your big files if you have connection problems and it seems that the connection always gets broken and you don't get the whole file transferred to CSC or back. So I said, async might be hard to approach at first if you're not familiar with it, but it's a very good tool and I would very much recommend you try it. And you can check our web pages, so there are some simple examples, and as I mentioned, there is easy to find instructions on the web and so on. So try it first with simple commands and then see if you can find use from the more complex commands. So this is basically what I have about transferring files between CSC and your own computer, but I'm going to briefly go through a couple of things that are related, even if they are sort of bit off topic. And one of them is command wget. And that can be used to download files from the net if they have an URL, so net address. So for example, I want to download here the chromosome sequence for chromosome 21, so I can here from the browser say copy link location, say wget and give the address, either FTP or HTTP address. And it will transfer the file. So this can be useful if you are downloading something like some reference data or test data sets or source codes for a program or something. You don't have to first download them to your own computer and then upload them to Taito. You can easily get them directly to your Taito disk. It will also accept choker signs, but now I will have to put this in double quotes. Pardon. I'm not going to run this because it will take quite a file. Those are big files and there are a lot of them. But it's good to know that you can also get more. There's also option let's do that again. And similarly to the async option, if something happens and the transfer gets cut short, there is an option dash continue, and it knows how to continue from the path that it got cut off previously. There's also a command called curl curl that works in very similar way. Both are available and use whatever you prefer. I could also point out now that we have this, for example, here we have this site with some human data. You can see that here at the bottom, they provide the MD5 checksums. So this is similar looking file than we just generated. So you could download this file and then use the MDSum to check that your files are okay after downloading. And many, if not, I would say most sites these days, if they provide some kind of datasets, they also provide the checksums for them. And then one sort of additional is that there's the Funet file sender. So this is more like a Dropbox kind of service. So if you want to send some data, your collaborator who does not have CSC account, so you have to so you can upload a file and then send it to so put an email address here and subject and message. And the receiver does not have to be a Funet customer, so it could be anybody. And on the other hand, if there's some collaborator you have that is not Funet customer and you would like them to use this service to send something to you, you can send them a guest voucher. and then they can use this guest voucher to use this service wants to send you a file. So this is sort of not directly about so much about moving files between your own computer CSC, but I thought this is a good related service. But that is pretty much everything I have. So are there any questions? One more thing I might mention was my so if you go to our basicresearch.csc.fi, go to support, go to guides, and there's the CSC Computing Environment User Guide. And this is a very good guide, and here you can see the chapter 5 is moving data between CSC and local environment, and it will have basically all the same things and much more than I went through in this webinar. So you can get more information about rsync and the other commands. And as I mentioned, if you go to this training pages and this webinar page, my presentation slides are there, and those presentation slides also include all the commands I used today, and description of the options I use. We get a comment here that in Windows, Mobile Xterm provides SSH and drag and drop file transfer and X11 support. So thanks for the tip. So Windows Mobile Xterm. Well, if there's nothing else, then big thank you for your attendance and attention. And as Maria mentioned, this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you can check it there later. And I hope to see you again on some other webinar.